Greetings once again. This is Hairy Nick. How's everyone out there going? We're going to talk today about a brand new Star Wars game coming out. Yes, it's one of those exciting times. Or at least, we're going to talk about a new adaptation of an existing game into the Star Wars universe in the form of Star Wars Villainous. Now, just at the top of this video, I'm just going to say there's about 1,001 articles and other YouTube videos already talking about this, already regurgitating like the same 4 press release images we've got from this game. And rather than be just another voice saying the same things again, I'll talk about this more as the point of view as someone who is an adult Star Wars tabletop gamer, mainly playing things like X-Wing and Legion, mainly the kind of things that most of my subscribers here want to talk about. And talk about how that may appeal to that kind of audience, just so we can make this conversation somewhat unique. So, Star Wars Villainous is an adaptation of the original Disney Villainous, a game I got into quite heavily back in the last major lockdown we had here in Victoria, Australia. I spent a lot of time, taking care of myself, watching the kind of TV shows and movies I wanted to watch, and I just decided to binge basically every Disney animated movie. And got back into those again, which was a lot of fun. And it sort of made me keep my eye out for this kind of stuff. Now, being a fan of Disney, we don't have the same kind of adult tabletop games like Star Wars Legion. I would love that personally, like a tabletop warfare skirmish game with Disney characters would be quite cool, but we generally have to settle for this kind of stuff that's sort of more family oriented. But that's okay. I think Ravensburger, the designer of this game, struck a good balance, and I think their main audience in mind when designing Disney Villainous was probably the older fans like myself, or even older. I sort of fit really neatly into that category. When I was a very small kid, we were in that early 90s era of Disney movies. Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Mulan, all that kind of stuff, the big renaissance it had. And I think if you fall into that category, you're very likely going to enjoy this game as well. Essentially what happens in Disney Villainous is you have this villain board in front of you, a villain token to show you where your character is, and every turn you move a token to one of these 4 locations, and then you are allowed to take each of the actions shown on this board. Obviously, it's way more complicated than that. All these actions kind of do different things, but essentially what you're trying to do in this game is enact your evil plot. You're trying to, in as fewer turns as possible, get to a game state where you have fulfilled your win conditions and you win the game. During that time, you're also trying to prevent your opponents from doing it. It's a very purist kind of game experience. You're just trying to make sure you win the game before your opponents. At the end of the day, that clock is all that matters. And in Disney Villainous, you have your villain deck and you have what's called a fate deck. And each character has their own villain deck and fate deck, and each character only interacts with things within their own realm. Yes, you can affect your opponent's board state by playing cards from their fate deck, and make the heroes of their realm attack them or stop their evil plan or whatever. But in this version of the game, it's very much each character is in their own closed garden, their own closed realm, where they only interact with their own game pieces. More recently, with the advent of Marvel Villainous, we saw that kind of game concept changing, where you had fate cards that were sort of able to affect all the villains on the board. And that makes sense in the world of Marvel, because Marvel is very much, at the very least, a multiverse where all the characters in the game can interact. Which brings us to Star Wars, the current release, which is very, very much a simple, closed universe, galaxy. All these characters do in fact interact. And it looks like Ravensburger is really pushing for that more sort of interactive, unique gameplay experience where you're meant to directly interact with your opponents a little bit more. Enough waffling on with the theory of the game. Let's actually show you one of these game pieces so I can better illustrate what I mean by that. Here in front of us is Darth Vader's game board. And you can see on each of the 4 locations, Mustafar, the Death Star, Cloud City, and the Emperor's Throne Room. Each of these locations has 4 different actions. In the case of Mustafar, Darth Vader's starting homeworld, we have what is the Vanquish action, at least that's what we call it in Disney Villainous. We have the Play a Card action, we have the Fate action, and we have the Gathering. It's called Power in Disney Villainous. I believe this is called Ambition in Star Wars Villainous, and this is basically the currency of this game. You use this in order to play the cards from your hand. There's a couple of different icons on here as well. We're not sure what this symbol here is supposed to mean yet, but essentially that's how the game works. Now, also, if you have a look at the portrait of Darth Vader, we have his objective, which is defeat Luke Skywalker. Which is interesting. I would have thought Vader's objective would be to convert Luke Skywalker to the dark side. And there'd be some kind of game mechanic around that. Essentially, Luke Skywalker is going to be one of the fate cards in Darth Vader's fate deck, and you'll have to be able to get Luke onto the board somehow and defeat him using the Vanquish action if you have the required resource on your side of the board. I'm being very vague when saying all this because we don't exactly know how those mechanics are going to work in the case of Vader and Luke. With Disney Villainous, there are lots of different mechanics we use for defeating our heroes, but essentially it usually comes about when you play your ally characters, which occupy the spaces below the different locations within your realm, where the heroes occupy these top spots, and they actually cover up 2 of the 4 actions on those locations. So apart from the negative effect that the character gives you, they also prevent you from taking those actions when you move to that space. That's all pretty much in keeping with what we have already with Disney and Marvel Villainous, but what's new about this is vehicles. And we have a couple here. Here's one of the villain vehicles, Darth Vader's TIE Advanced X1. We can see that there's a cost associated with playing it, so it works like most other cards in the villain deck. But what's interesting about it is it has 3 actions on the card and gain 2 ambition, like it's something you do when you play it. I have a bit of a theory about this. I'm not sure how this card's supposed to work. It's not like a one-off event, obviously. You have the ability to play these actions. Maybe you play this card, then you can do one or all of these actions and gain 2 ambition. Or maybe, just maybe, we've used this mechanic over here. If we have a look at Darth Vader's game board, there is a space called Deep Space. Perhaps you're supposed to play your vehicle onto that. That turns it into like an extra 5th location that has these 3 actions, and maybe every time you move to it, you gain 2 ambition. I'm not too sure. We don't really have all the information on that, but that seems kind of cool. Nevertheless, it seems like there's some kind of way to add actions to locations, or maybe it's something you can do every turn, depending on whether or not it's on the board. I don't know, but it looks really, really cool. It's a brand new mechanic for the game, and I think that's what's most interesting. What we don't know is whether we're actually going to be sort of combining these villain vehicles, whether there's a way for the various villains to sort of use this, whether, you're playing against Darth Vader, say you're Kylo Ren or someone, and then you can use his TIE Advanced X1 if you draw it from the deck. I don't think that's likely going to happen, but it could be really, really cool. Another vehicle we've shown as well is this here, the Millennium Falcon. This is one of the hero vehicles. And right off the bat, we can see that this can be played against multiple different villains, not just Darth Vader, although it does reference Darth Vader. Its text reads, when a hero has been defeated, move them to the Millennium Falcon. Players targeting Darth Vader with a fate action may play a hero from the Millennium Falcon to a new location instead of drawing cards from Darth Vader's fate deck. So what's interesting about this is we don't know if this is supposed to go either in that deep space, space on Vader's card, realm, whatever, or whether it's meant to go onto a location. I think the idea is this is supposed to be somewhat communal. Like this is played into the center of the board, and all heroes are defeated who are moved to the Millennium Falcon. There's no indication on the card as to how you're meant to get rid of it. Maybe that correlates to one of these actions that we haven't been able to identify. Maybe it's detailed on some of the villain cards. Who knows? But it seems like a really cool, fun, dynamic card to have. Like, this could just be in Darth Vader's Fate deck, for example. And like in Marvel Villainous, it might get combined with all the other Fate decks for all the other villains, and suddenly you as a player play against this where you otherwise wouldn't. Whatever combination of villains that you are playing with dictates the makeup of that Fate deck, which is kind of cool. It's going to lead to more unique game states, and this in particular can do all kinds of wild things. You know, if we're sort of doing this to all heroes in all different realms, or whatever we're going to call them in Star Wars Villainous, that's potentially going to lead to some very neat stuff. And it sort of highlights what Ravensburger is trying to do as they move into making more Marvel and Star Wars Villainous. They're sort of trying to push for that more dynamic, fluid game state where all kinds of interesting, unique things can happen, as opposed to what happens in Disney Villainous, where everything kind of happens in isolation. No matter what villain you play in Disney Villainous, you're going to have a relatively straightforward experience. Like, if you play a villain 5 times, you sort of know what to expect, even if your opponents can sort of target you more with fate actions and play more of your fate cards against you. It's still the same deck of fate cards. You don't make up a unique deck. There's no deck building or combining experience in Disney Villainous, where in this game, that looks like it might be a key feature of it. One last thing I'm going to show you is these 4 pawns here. These are the game pieces that you use in order to represent where your villain is within their realm. It also shows off the 5 characters we're going to be able to play in the core box set. Vader, Kylo Ren, Asajj Ventress, General Grievous, and Moff Gideon. I love the inclusion of Moff Gideon. That's really, really cool. I gotta be honest, I've never been a fan of these. They feel a little cheap and plasticky and obviously manufactured. You know what? Let me show you. Yeah, they're these ones here. That's the one for Captain Hook, for example. I don't know how well that's showing up on camera. It's a pretty cool little fun translucent figure. It's certainly unique, and I dig that about that. There's Maleficent, for example, if you want to be able to see that as well. But it's sort of made of this sort of cheapish, translucent plastic. It's cool, but I would kind of prefer like little minifigures or sort of higher quality busts. You know, this game at the end of the day is not cheap. It's usually around $90 Australian for the core sets. A little bit cheaper for the expansions, but not much cheaper. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about these. They're interesting, and but I like properly painted miniatures and that kind of stuff, but that's just me. And yeah, for the time being, that's all we know about this. If you are an X-Wing player or a Legion player and you want something a little bit more accessible, perhaps to play with people in your life that are not so much into the more adult tabletop games, Disney Villainous, at the very least for me, has proven to sort of fill that void a lot better. It's not quite, in terms of, it's not quite, Cards Against Humanity in terms of like ultra accessibility, but it's certainly a step more accessible than something like X-Wing. And for people in your life, family, friends, that kind of stuff, it's a really sort of good fun experience. And honestly, I can't recommend it enough. It's an awesome game. I can't wait for this Star Wars variant to come out. I'm gonna get this and get all the expansions for this, and there's another Disney expansion coming out soon. I'll probably get that as well. It's one of those games that have really sort of captured my interest, and I can't help but sort of get every expansion for. It's seriously a lot of fun, and yeah, big recommend. And with that, thank you all for watching. Stay tuned, more X-Wing content coming out real soon. If you're interested in supporting the channel a bit further, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of fun stuff. Also, we do have a Patreon for the channel where we talk mainly X-Wing, but I'm always keen to sort of get different content for the channel. So if you're interested in getting involved with the conversation there and supporting the channel a little bit more, the link for that is down in the description below. But in the meantime, I'll catch you all in the next video.